Part 2, Fictional Geography. Hey everyone, and welcome back to UnMasked DC Primer Series. In our last video, we outlined the universe and multiverse, which is the setting for all the stories and heroes found in DC Comics. In this second part of our three-part primer, we're going to scale things down a bit as we further investigate the fictional planets, countries, and cities present in DC Comics. Back in the year 1990, when paper role-playing games were really starting to flourish, the people at DC decided that they wanted a piece of the paper RPG pie. Wanting fans to be able to play in these DC storylines meant letting them know about the places that these stories take place. So, as part of the DC Heroes RPG Guides, Mayfair Games Incorporated published a supplemental book titled The Atlas of the DC Universe, which describe these fictional locations, and will be the central reference from which we are pulling our information. So sit back and enjoy this trip through the places and settings of some of your favorite comics. As I said in our last video, each of the 52 Earths in the Orrery of Worlds actually represents a whole universe, but we use the planet Earth as our focal point. So having just finished looking at the multiverse as a whole, let's narrow our view and check out the fictional planets found within each universe of the multiverse. Now, so far in the over 75 years of making comics, DC has created over 150 fictional planets. Obviously, we're not going to cover them all. We don't have the time and you don't have the patience. But don't worry, we'll be sure to cover the most important ones. First, let's start off with a planet almost everyone is familiar with, Krypton. Birthplace of such heroes as Superman, Supergirl, and Krypto the Superdog, Krypton in many universes no longer exists, having been destroyed many years ago. Supposedly 1.5 times bigger than Earth, Krypton orbited a red sun called Rao. The Kryptonians that inhabited it, while appearing physically human, proved to be much more advanced, as through their achievements of perfecting cloning, conquering disease, and delaying the aging process, they had basically made themselves immortal. Too bad that they were terrible at looking after their planet. A series of events, including a war with a pro-clone rights terrorist faction known as Black Zero, led to the weakening of Krypton's core, ensuring that it was only a matter of time before the planet exploded. Unfortunately, very few people were willing to listen to this coming disaster. This resulted in only a handful of Kryptonians, including Kal-El, Superman, and his cousin, Kara Zor-El, escaping the destruction of the planet, having been sent away while they were still young. The whole thing seems kinda dumb, but I guess when your planet is about to explode, shooting your kids into a rocket into space seems like the better choice. There is a lot more to tell here with the history of Krypton, but we'll get to that when we explore the mythos of the Superman family. Moving on to the star of Vega, we see the planet Tamaran, former homeworld of the hero Koriand'r, aka Starfire of the Teen Titans. However, like Krypton, Tamaran no longer exists, having been destroyed in war. Luckily enough, Tamaranians were able to evacuate and are now settled on the planet Karna. But while this ensured their survival, it left them under the tyrannical rule of Starfire's evil sister, Blackfire. Another planet of note orbiting Vega is Sarnia, homeworld of the interstellar mercenary and bounty hunter Lobo. Though this planet is also no longer inhabited. Starting to see a pattern here, aren't you? Anyway, the people of Sarnia were actually quite peaceful, but Lobo, who in post-crisis continuity has been written to be bad from birth, was horrifically bored by Sarnia and her people. Killing many with his own hands, Lobo destroyed the rest of the population by bioengineering a small flying scorpion-like creature with a fatal venom and releasing it onto the population. As the people of Sarnia experienced irreversible neural damage and excruciating pain for days before dying, the immune Lobo celebrated by playing thrash metal, while every other Sarnian was wiped from the planet. That is, save for Lobo's 4th grade teacher, Miss Trib. Wonder what she did to earn that honor. In our next section, we'll be delving into the lore of the Green Lantern Corps, and the many amazing fictional planets that came from it, so stay tuned. First of the Green Lantern planets that we're going to explore is Oa. One of the oldest places in known space, Oa is located at the very center of the universe, and was originally the home of a blue-skinned race known as the Malthusians, who are now known as the Guardians of the Universe. You might also notice that all these Malthusians are male. So what happened to all the females of their race? Well, we'll let you know in just a few minutes. But for now, let's focus on Oa and its inhabitants. It was these Guardians that created the Green Lantern Corps, a cosmic force of universal police officers, equipped with green power rings and lanterns to help them protect the universe. Over the years, Oa has become a desolate desert of a world, with only the Guardians' fortress city standing the test of time. This central citadel housed the central power battery that powered the lanterns and rings. However, in recent storylines, Oa seems to have been destroyed, leaving the Green Lantern Corps to find a new base of operations on the planet Mogo. Now, Mogo as a planet is pretty awesome, as it is not just a planet but a character as well. Mogo is sentient, mobile, and counted among the most powerful members of the Green Lantern Corps. When the Lanterns are in a bind and must deal with a universal heavy hitter, they bring in Mogo. And when Mogo comes, their enemies get wrecked. The awesomeness that is Mogo aside, we need to move on to the other Lantern faction planets. That's right, there are more than just the Green Lanterns out there. But then some of you already knew that. But for those of you who don't, there are a total of 7 different groups of lanterns. That is, not counting the black and white lanterns that appeared during the Blackest Night saga. And each of these 7 lantern colors has their own members, weapons, power cell battery, and of course, planet home base. So let's quickly run them down. The first is Yzmalt. This planet houses the red power battery and is home to the Red Lanterns, who use their rage to fuel their attacks. Like the Red Lanterns, Yzmalt boasts a fiery temper, with much of its surface covered in volcanic rock and molten lava. Okara is for the Orange Lanterns, better known as Agent Orange, whose main motivator is greed. Okara acts not only as the home for their power battery, but also as a storage space to keep all their ill-gotten goods. Thirdly, we have Quard. This planet was actually part of the antimatter universe, and one of Quard's moons was the birthplace of the Anti-Monitor of Crisis on Infinite Earths fame. Since the crisis, the planet has become the home base for the Yellow Lanterns, aka the Sinestro Corps. Moving on to the star system of Polaris, we find Odym, a lush, jungle-like planet brimming with life. During the events leading up to the Green Lantern Blackest Night saga, 2 Green Lanterns who were banished from Oa, Ganthet and Sade, settled on Odym and formed the Blue Lantern Corps to help push back the evil of the coming Black Lanterns. Next, we have the planet of Nock. Originally, the inhabitants of this world were invaded, and a maze of cells was built just below the planet's surface. But eventually, the Green Lantern, Abin Sur, along with the keeper of the indigo light, Nostromo, came and retook the planet. Freeing those enslaved, they set into motion the formation of the Indigo Tribe, who would use Nock as a base for their power battery that would charge their staffs. Finally, the last of the Lantern planets is Zamaron. Sounds a lot like the word Amazon, like Wonder Woman and the Amazons. Well, this isn't just a coincidence. This planet is home to the Zamaron race, who are the female counterparts of Oa's Malthusians. Told you we'd get to them. These warrior women, capable of using violet energy, formed the Star Sapphires by taking women not only from their own race, but from all around the universe, who displayed features identical to their queen. Like all the other Lantern factions out there, there's much more to be said about the Star Sapphires, but we'll have to get to that in a later video. 2 other planets introduced by the Green Lantern stories are Helvin and Korugar. Arriving on Helvin is much like walking into the frames of a Disney cartoon. Though technically all part of the same race, the inhabitants of Helvin appear to be sentient, mostly woodland animals, including foxes, raccoons, and the squirrel-seeming Green Lantern Chip, and later his replacement Badge. And while we know these guys can pack quite a punch, it's really hard to take them seriously in battle when they are the perfect size for punting. Meanwhile, the planet Korugar is the homeworld of the villain Sinestro. This arch-nemesis of Hal Jordan had originally been a Green Lantern, but like a small-town sheriff with too much power, he became hella corrupt, and positioned himself as dictator of Korugar. Obviously, the other Green Lanterns were not down with this, so not only did they strip him of his Green Lantern ring and powers, but they banished his ass to Quard. Now, this might seem like a good idea at the time, but as we saw, this decision eventually came back to bite them in the ass, as Sinestro became a Yellow Lantern and rallied others behind him to create the evil Sinestro Corps. Moving away from the Green Lantern mythos, our next section will deal with the planets featured during the 30th century, in the storylines of the Legion of Superheroes, along with a couple other remaining planets of note. The storylines of the young futuristic heroes, the Legion of Superheroes, opens us up to a much vaster landscape, as this group of heroes tirelessly works to protect the universe. Planets that play a key role in these stories include the following. Brow, home of Cosmic Boy, a founding member of the Legion who, along with other members of his planet, wields the ability to manipulate fields of magnetism. Meanwhile, Rimbor, home of Ultra Boy, is a multicultural planet, housing dozens of different races, but also has the reputation of being a rough and lawless world where crime and corruption run rampant. As Obi-Wan might say, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Next are Zune and Trom. Zune was the original home of the hero Timberwolf, though it has been retconned after the 0-hour Crisis in Time reboot that he is actually now from Rimbor. Trom, on the other hand, has remained the home of Element Lad, but its high levels of radioactivity resulted in the deaths of almost all of its inhabitants, Element Lad appearing to be Trom's only surviving son. Winneth, a planet settled by humans sometime between the 20th and 30th centuries, gave rise to the twin heroes Lightning Lass and Lightning Lad. An interesting bit of trivia about Winneth is that for some reason, almost all children born on this planet are twins. Neat, huh? Colu, also known as Bryak, Yod, and in current continuity, Yod Colu, has at times been said to be the originator of the evil AI Brainiac. Later, Colu would also be hailed as the home planet of Viral Dox, better known as the Legion hero Brainiac 5, who claims to be Brainiac's 30th century descendant, and is working to prove himself to be better than his evil ancestor. And I thought having daddy issues was bad. Anyway, there's a lot more history here to explore, but we'll have to cover it in another video. One of the main villains in the Legion of Superheroes storylines is the One-Handed Tyr. This Captain Hook wannabe terrorizes the galaxy from his mobile planet of Tiraz, where the people there are devoted to the art of war. And finally, we have Shanghalla and Weber's World. Shanghalla, whose name is an amalgamation of Shangri-La and Valhalla, is a memorial planetoid for the fallen heroes of the Legion of Superheroes, while Weber's World is an artificial planet-sized satellite that houses the government of the United Planets. Now, we know we missed a couple of Legionnaire planets during this exploration, but unfortunately we couldn't find enough information to make their mention worthwhile. Other planets of note outside the 30th century storylines are Thanagar, home of everyone's favorite mace-wielding couple, Hawkman and Hawkgirl, along with the rest of their race of winged humanoids. Well, at least within the alien explanation for these characters. And finally, we have Takron Galtos, a planet-sized prison used to house the galaxy's most dangerous criminals, including ones rounded up by Amanda Waller and her Suicide Squad. Now, there are also a few realms already mentioned in the multiverse that at one time were described as planets, such as Apocalypse and New Genesis. But as we can see from the multiverse map, that is not the case. True, they are planet-like in shape and configuration, but they are now considered beyond the physical realm of planets. Another difference that should be noted is the exclusion of Bizarro World from this list. As some of you might already know, Bizarro World, also known as Hetra, or Earth spelled backwards, is a fictional world where everything is inverted. All the characters we know and love exist here in their Bizarro forms, the most famous being Bizarro Superman. These characters are the opposite of their hero counterparts, evil with gray skin and the world's most confusing way of speaking. No, seriously, it's amazing they get anything done, as they say the opposite of what they mean. So getting a straight answer out of them is probably next to impossible. Speaking patterns aside, because Bizarro World is basically another Earth, it has been incorporated into the new Orrery of Worlds as the cube-shaped Earth 29. But before we wrap up this section on fictional planets, we'd like to point out that known planets within our solar system also play a big part in some of DC's storylines. The main one being the planet Mars. In DC, Mars is an inhabited world with at least 2 different races, the White Martians and the Green Martians, of who the hero, Martian Manhunter, is part of. Or was part of. You see, while at one time the Green Martians thrived, they were basically completely wiped out by the evil White Martians, who seem to take pride in being the Nazis of Mars. Needless to say, Martian Manhunter has a beef with them. But we'll discuss that at another time. So that should give you a general overview on some of the fictional planets that will play a role in the stories of DC heroes. Obviously, we didn't mention all of them, but we'll be sure to point them out as each of our videos needs. Next up, we move away from the universe as a whole, and turn our focus to our own planet, and take a look at the fictional countries there, starting with the fictional islands and European nations that DC seems to have a flair for. As with our list of fictional planets, we know that there are dozens of fictional countries that DC has made over the years, but we'll only be exploring those we feel are integral to understanding the DC universe. First on our list is Themyscira, originally known as Paradise Island. This island nation is home to Wonder Woman and the Amazons. The origin of this island was revamped a couple times, along with the mythology surrounding Wonder Woman. But simply put, Themyscira was a secret island tied to the gods of Greek mythology and completely inhabited by women. That's right, no boys allowed. In fact, no man had stepped foot on the island until Steve Trevor, a U.S. Army intelligence officer and Wonder Woman's future love interest, crash-landed there during World War II. At least within the Golden Age storylines, that is. Anyway, though Wonder Woman and the Amazons are seen as great warriors, Themyscira was a place where peace prevailed, at least among its inhabitants, as a sort of allegory where women would thrive away from the hostile, male-dominated world. Themyscira also had its foil in the island Thalarion, home to a race of male warriors, the Gagarians. Following Themyscira's format, but just in reverse, this island was a complete boys' club, and only men were allowed to set foot on the island. Well, they did make an exception for the goddess Athena, but then again, wouldn't you? Along with Themyscira and Thalarion, DC has a history of creating fictional island nations to suit their stories and characters. So let's take a look at these. First, let's start with Starfish Island, where in the comics Oliver Queen was stranded before becoming the vigilante Green Arrow. It was here where he honed his skills with a bow and arrow that made him the world-class archer he is today. But why Green Arrow? Well, Oliver's time on the island also has an answer for that. During his time on the island, Oliver needed to camouflage himself. So using the green foliage around him, he fashioned clothes so he might hide and survive. Kind of a shame they didn't put that little tidbit in CW's Arrow. Speaking of Arrow, for those of you more familiar with that incarnation of the character, you will realize that the island was changed from Starfish Island to the much cooler sounding Lian Yu, which is believed to be somewhere in the South China Sea. Also mentioned in Arrow is the island of Corto Maltese, the often war-torn country off the coast of South America. While little is known about the island itself, like Where's Waldo, it seems to keep popping up, having been referred to several times in the TV show Smallville, Frank Miller's comic The Dark Knight Returns, and Tim Burton's 1989 Batman film. The island of Kooey, along with having a ridiculous-sounding name, has the distinction of being a sentient creature capable of moving around, similar to the planet Mogo and Marvel Comics' own sentient island, Krakoa, though this concept was never really explored, unfortunately. Moving on to the Caribbean Isles, we will find the small nation of Santa Prisca. This Cuba-esque nation is home to one of the most notorious Batman villains of the past 2 decades, Bane. Orphaned as a young boy and imprisoned by tyrants, Bane became a lab rat for those in power, and became one of the first users of the super muscle enhancer known as Venom. He would later rise to freedom and criminal power by being known as the man who broke the Batman's back. And finally, we have Dinosaur Island, which has had 2 incarnations. The first being an amusement park, similar to Jurassic Park, but populated with robotic yet realistic dinosaurs. While the second incarnation, as you might guess, is populated by living dinosaurs. However, these creatures were much bigger than their real-life counterparts, adding to the level of danger they presented, because, apparently regular dinosaurs are so last season. Dinosaurs aside, let's move on to the mainland and the continent of Europe. Here you will find such countries as Markovia. Wedged between Belgium, France, and Luxembourg, this country is home to the heroes Geoforce and the Teen Titan Terra. These 2 siblings are members of the royal family there, though they have had to deal with quite a bit in order to keep their country intact. Over the years, Markovia has seen its fair share of unrest, having been invaded by Nazis, Russians, and even vampires. Looking further north, you will find Kasnia, a country in the Balkans tormented by civil war and featured in the TV show Arrow during an episode highlighting the Suicide Squad. The country makes several appearances in the DC animated universe, during episodes in the Justice League, Batman Beyond, Superman the Animated Series, and the animated Batman movie, Mystery of the Batwoman. Meanwhile, the nation of Pokolostan is a former Soviet republic, once ruled by Kryptonian supervillain General Zod. Now, despite the tyranny brought by Zod's rule, this small nation was also very safe and prosperous, due to their access to Kryptonian technology. But, strangely enough, it seems that Pokolostan is in the exact same place and takes up the exact same amount of space as the nation of Medora, another fictional country, home of the Green Lantern supervillain Sonar. So what exactly does this mean? Unfortunately, we don't know. Our best guess is that perhaps Zod took over Medora and renamed it, making the 2 places one and the same. And last of the purely European countries is the fallen kingdom of Vltava. Members of the royal family there included Werner Vertigo, better known as the villain Count Vertigo. However, the Count is now the last surviving member of the royal family, as the powerful being known as the Spectre completely destroyed Vltava, having deemed the country unsavable. In our next section, we will move on to the Middle East, as well as the sunken kingdom of Atlantis, as we wrap up our exploration of the fictional countries and kingdoms DC has created to tell these amazing stories. Of the several Middle Eastern countries DC Comics have added to the Earth's landscape, one of the most famous of which would be Khandaq, homeland of the villain and occasional anti-hero Black Adam. This nation was at one time ruled by a dictator known as Asim Muhammad, until Black Adam, along with Atom Smasher, and a group of former Justice Society members overthrew Muhammad, with Adam taking his place as ruler. Unfortunately, Adam proved to be little better, going on to enforce draconian laws and public executions. However, when his wife Isis and brother-in-law Osiris were murdered by the Four Horsemen, a group of artificially enhanced beings, Adam turned his sights on their base of operations, the country of Bialya. Also created by DC, Bialya is located south of Turkey on the Mediterranean Sea. Under the rule of Queen Bee and the Hajarfi brothers, this nation has been a haven for supervillains. But with the murder of Osiris and Isis, the population of Bialya was decimated when Black Adam attacked, seeking revenge. In the aftermath of the attack, only 250,000 people remained, and under the new rule of President Rashid, the country began to rebuild itself, with the help and support of Wayne Tech and Star Labs. Other Middle Eastern countries that can be found in the DC universe are Kurak, Umek, and Surak. Unfortunately, it seems pretty obvious that the people at DC were struggling to come up with names, as Surak is a combination of Syria and Iraq, and Umek literally stands for unnamed Middle Eastern country, while Kurak is yet another deviation of an Iraq-like country. All of these countries are supposedly positioned in and around the Persian Gulf, and are often used as politically correct substitutes for a country with a large terrorist faction. Though, to be honest, equating the Middle East with terrorists isn't exactly politically correct, but what you gonna do? Turning our attention to beneath the ocean's waves, we will find the nation of Atlantis, home of the hero Aquaman, king of Atlantis. Now, this kingdom is based on our own mythology surrounding the Lost Continent, and is located deep within the North Atlantic Ocean. As you might suspect, Atlantis has a very long and detailed history, which we'll try to only give the pertinent notes about here. Like the Atlantis mentioned in our own mythology, this once great nation lived above the waves, and the people here mastered many magical and technological advances over the centuries. That is until a large meteor crashed into the earth, causing a great flood that sunk the land of Atlantis. But in precaution before the meteor hit, a giant dome was built over the city of Poseidonis and saved many Atlanteans from the flood. However, something had to be done to ensure their survival. Trapped on the ocean floor in the domed city, some Atlanteans turned to the priest mage Shalako, brother of King Orin I. Now, this guy had all the makings of a charismatic cult leader. Already he had convinced many that the flood was punishment from the gods, and those wishing to not anger them further followed Shalako, who, with the help of his magic, brought his followers through underground tunnels to the ruins of their sister city, Tritonus. There Shalako once again used his magic to create a dome over the ruined city, creating a new colony there. Meanwhile, in the years following the flood, Shalako's brother, King Orin I, and his scientists developed a serum that would turn the people of Atlantis into aquatic amphibians, who could survive both in the ocean depths and upon land, while retaining their mostly human appearance. He offered this serum to the people of Tritonus, who took it happily. But Shalako, claiming the serum to be an insult to the gods, called upon the dark gods to lay a curse on the people of Tritonus. These people, unlike the Atlanteans of Poseidonis, began to mutate into merfolk with fishtails and some not so pretty. Anyway, they were unable to live out of water for any length of time. In the end, Shalako's evil actions were eventually exposed by his son Dardanus, leading to a rebellion of the Tritonus merfolk, who killed Shalako and his family, save for Dardanus, who went into hiding. Now, despite these setbacks, Atlantis continued to thrive, but the people of the surface world would soon forget that they existed as the centuries passed. Only when the current king of Atlantis, Arthur Curry, took on the identity of Aquaman to help protect the world's oceans, did the modern world learn about the existence of Atlantis. So that basically covers all the countries created by DC that are of particular note. We'll be sure to mention any others as they become relevant, though. Next up, we look at the amazing fictional cities found in the USA that are at the heart of some of your favorite DC comics, so stay tuned. Once again, let's scale down our view even further as we take a look at the cities DC created to house some of their most famous characters. First off, it should be noted that being an American company, most of the stories in DC take place in the good old US of A. So this is where we'll find most of the fictional cities. Secondly, for a long time it wasn't really clear just where these cities were. There were some general hints, such as Gotham City being almost completely an island, and the vague notion that Metropolis was somewhere in the upper northeast. But it wasn't until 1990 when we got a more definitive map with the Atlas of the DC Universe. At least within the US. So let's start there. Here's the map of the USA as DC portrays it. And of the 50 items listed in the legend, not all of them are fictional cities. Many are quite real, such as Los Angeles, Seattle, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Houston, Denver, and Miami, just to name a few. Many of these cities play host to characters found within the DC universe, such as Washington, D.C. being the home of the hero Steel, or San Francisco being the former home base of the Teen Titans, Supergirl, and Zatanna. But we're just going to focus on cities made especially for the DC universe. The other items listed on this legend are a few important landmarks and buildings. One being the Challengers Mountain Amusement Park, which is the secret base for the team of adventurers known as the Challengers of the Unknown. As their name suggests, this group gets up to weird and far-out adventures, dealing with science fiction, aliens, and the paranormal. The other more well-known building is Belle Reve Prison in the state of Louisiana. Housing some of the worst criminals out there, this is just the place where Amanda Waller picks up her members for her ever-changing Suicide Squad. But we'll get more into that at a later date. The first fictional city listed on this map is Star City, located on the Pacific coast north of San Francisco. This is the hometown of the hero Green Arrow, aka Oliver Queen and his companions. Known as a haven for artists and a port city, the location of Star City was very much up for debate over the decades, jumping from state to state, as it was been said to be on the Great Lakes in the 1960s, or on Massachusetts Bay during the 1970s. However, in the past years, DC has made it official that Star City is a Pacific Coast city close to San Francisco. To the south of Star City, you will find Coast City, just 20 miles away from Edwards Air Force Base, and hometown of the Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. Though it was destroyed during the Reign of Superman storyline, giving way to the Zero Hour Crisis saga, it was later restored by the heroes Spectre and Hal Jordan himself. But if we move north up the coast and inland, we will find a second haven for the Green Lantern, in Evergreen City. Located approximately 50 miles southwest of Spokane, Washington, Evergreen City was where Hal retreated for a while, following his failed relationship with Carol Ferris, who in most continuities is a member of the Star Sapphires. As we move southeast and into the heart of America, we find three other important cities. The first being rural Smallville, Kansas. The perfect picture of middle America farmland, Smallville is the childhood home of Clark Kent, aka Superman, while he was being raised by his adoptive parents, John and Martha Kent. Here, Clark not only adopted his good old country boy identity, but also learned to cultivate his superpowers in secret with the help of the Kents. Moving over into the state of Missouri, we will find Central City, the much more urban home of the second version of The Flash, Barry Allen. Now, I want to take a moment to point out just how awesome the people of Central City are. That is, as long as we ignore the storylines of the New 52 Flash. Because while most superheroes walk the line of being revered and reviled by the people they protect, the people of Central City totally have the Flash's back. They are his biggest fans, having erected a Flash museum in his honor. Just goes to show that a kind and sunny disposition will win people over more than a gravelly voice and regular beatings. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. Anyway, on the other side of the Mississippi River lies Keystone City. This blue-collar sister to Central City is the home of the Golden Age version of The Flash, Jay Garrick. Also, the third version of The Flash, Wally West, formerly known as Kid Flash, eventually takes up residence here as well, starting in the 1980s comics. Now, I'm sure a bunch of you DC fans out there are raging over the fact that we haven't mentioned Metropolis or Gotham City, probably the two most famous cities in the DC universe. Well, we're getting to it, so hold your horses. The truth is that these two cities, plus a few others, were actually pretty close to one another, residing in the Northeast, which will be the focus of our next section, along with any interesting U.S. cities of note that the Atlas map failed to mention, so stay tuned. Like the map before, this map lists a bunch of actual cities that have ties to the DC universe, such as Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston. But let's focus on the cities we just mentioned. Metropolis, current hometown of Clark Kent, aka Superman, can be found in the southern half of the state of Delaware. As the name would suggest, the city is depicted as one of the largest and wealthiest on the planet. Though often depicted as a fictional parallel to New York City, Metropolis was actually modeled on the Toronto skyline by co-creator and artist of Superman, Joe Shuster. Though if they really want to be true about Metropolis being like Toronto, Clark would hide his identity wearing a toque and would listen to Drake. On the other hand, Gotham City, home to Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, has also been said to be the DC Universe version of New York, playing gothy emo kid to Metropolis's preppy hipster. This is further cemented by comic book artist superstar Frank Miller, describing Metropolis to be New York during the day and Gotham to be New York at night. However, since then, Gotham has been mapped out to be a separate city, found in New Jersey. And though it looks to be part of the mainland, the central hub of the city has often been shown to be an island. And with all the crazies living there, it's probably a good idea to keep them off the mainland. Other fictional cities of note on this map are Civic City, Pennsylvania, where you can find the headquarters of the Golden Age Justice Society, while Happy Harbor, Rhode Island, has been headquarters for both the Justice League and Young Justice groups. Not pictured on either of these maps are the cities Bludhaven, National City, New Venice, Fawcett City, and Dakota City. Bludhaven is the new hunting grounds of the grown-up version of Robin, Nightwing, and is also said to be located somewhere in New Jersey, just so he can stay close to Daddy Bats. Surprisingly, it has been said on several occasions that Bludhaven is an even rougher and more corrupt city than Gotham, if you can imagine. Which makes me wonder, does this mean Nightwing is more badass than Batman? Anyway, National City, featuring deserts, palm trees, an oceanic coastline, and a buzzing urban center, looks to be a parallel to Los Angeles, California, and is home of Supergirl, aka Kara Danvers, as seen on CBS's new kick-ass drama, Supergirl. Seriously, if you're not watching this, you are missing out. Moving on, New Venice, on the other hand, is actually a partly submerged city off the coast of Florida, with many canals instead of roads, and acts as a base of operations for Aquaman. We should also probably mention at this time that part of San Diego is also submerged, though this time completely, creating another base on the Pacific coast for Aquaman and his allies, known as Sub Diego. This once again reinforces the idea that without water, Aquaman sucks. But don't worry, Aquaman, we still believe in you. Fawcett City, located in the American Midwest, is the idyllic metropolitan community home to Billy Batson, the young boy who would earn the word of power Shazam, that would allow him to transform into the hero Captain Marvel. Also in this city would be one of Captain Marvel's main villains, the mad industrialist Thaddeus Bodog Sivana, who was the one responsible for the murder of Billy's parents. Meanwhile, Dakota City is the urban home of the teen hero Static. Though it's unclear where exactly Dakota City is meant to be, there is a strong possibility due to its landscape and more ethnically diverse inhabitants that it was modeled to be the Detroit of the DC universe, and is therefore somewhere in Michigan. Now I know we haven't mentioned all the US fictional cities, but I think it's time we move on, as our next section will look at the world at large and what fictional cities can be found there. DC has created cities all over the globe, But let's start off somewhat close to their home base of the United States. Along the Pacific coast of Canada, you'll find Empire City, located somewhere around Vancouver, British Columbia. This city is home to the second Manhunter, known as Paul Kirk. As we move eastward across Canada and into Greenland, we will find the hidden city of Feathera, home to a society of bird-human hybrids, including the hero Northwind. Another hidden city located in Turkey, literally called the Hidden City, yeah, real original guys, is the genealogical origin place for the heroes Zatara and Zatanna, who are part of the magically gifted Homo Magi that reside there. The mystical city of Nanda Parbat, based on the mythical Shangri-La, where time moves differently, sometimes faster and sometimes slower, can be found deep within the Tibetan mountains. This place is tied heavily to the League of Assassins as a place of enlightenment and training, and has been depicted in both the TV show Arrow and the movie Batman Begins. Science City, which can be seen here being attacked by the giant starfish-like alien, Starro the Conqueror, is located somewhere in Russia and is home to the Teen Titan known as Red Star. I wish I could be a bit more specific about where in Russia this is, but with this being such a big-ass country, unfortunately I'm a little short on information. Meanwhile, moving on to the continent of South America, the Ultramarine Corps can be found in the city of Superbia. But don't worry, you can't miss it. It's the only flying city floating over the remains of Montevideo, Uruguay. Finally, we have Gorilla City, located somewhere in the Congo of Africa. This city was created and populated by gorillas that gained superintelligence and telepathic abilities after an alien spacecraft crash-landed in their jungle. And I'm not saying that these guys are smart for gorillas. I mean, these chimps make your college professors look like chumps. And yes, I know gorillas and chimps aren't the same thing, it just sounded cool. Anyway, with their superintelligence, the gorillas became even more technologically advanced than humans, but remained cloaked from the rest of the world. That is until recently, when a decision was made to reveal themselves. They have since joined the United Nations as a city-state. So that just about does it for our trip through the fictional places and settings found in the DC universe. As stated before, we can only cover so much, and of course it's possible we might have missed something important. If so, let us know in the comments and we'll be sure to address it in a later video. Thanks again for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for the third and final part of our DC primer, entitled Heroes and Inhabitants. Here we'll finally get to the heart of what this series will be about, as we cover the kinds of characters we will be investigating in this series. What kind of powers do these heroes have? How did they get them? These questions and much more will be answered, so stay tuned to UnMasked here on New World Slackers.